Imagine being just 12 years old, sitting quietly in your assigned first-class seat on a plane, only to be told you don't belong there. That was the moment Amara Brooks, a calm and poised young girl, faced an experience that would change her life forever. A lead flight attendant and co-pilot demanded she leave her seat, ignoring her confirmed ticket and her mother's VIP arrangements. But who was really being judged here? Was it just a policy or something far deeper, an invisible line drawn by prejudice and bias? How does a child find the courage to stand firm when the adults around her wield power so casually? What happens when dignity is stripped away mid-flight, and the only choice left is to fight quietly but fiercely for justice? And can a single moment on an airplane spark a movement powerful enough to transform an entire industry? This is not just a story about a flight. It's a story about resilience, strength, and the unwavering bond between a mother and daughter. It's about how one girl's quiet defiance forced an airline to confront its deepest biases and inspired a community to break the silence on injustice. If you believe in courage and justice, hit like, share this story, and subscribe now. Let's begin. The hum of the plane's engines was a steady lullaby as Amara Brooks settled quietly into Seat 2B on Harmony Airways Flight 427. The window beside her framed a sky streaked with the soft amber hues of an early evening. She slipped on her headphones, the gentle rhythm of her favorite playlist drowning out the low murmur of the other passengers. It was her favorite way to stay calm, a little bubble of music to shield her from the chaos of the world. At 12 years old, Amara had learned early how to carry herself with a quiet confidence that went far beyond her years. Her dark eyes flicked up briefly to the polished cabin walls, glinting softly under the warm overhead lights. She was dressed neatly in a navy cardigan over a crisp white blouse. Her natural hair pulled back into a tidy bun. She looked every inch the poised young lady her mother, Nadia Brooks, the CEO of Brooks Global Logistics, had raised her to be. Amara wasn't alone in this first-class section for the first time in her life. She had flown often with her mother, the CEO of Brooks Global Logistics. But today was different. This was her first flight traveling alone, a big step for both of them. Nadia had meticulously arranged everything, personally confirming the booking through Harmony Airways VIP desk weeks earlier. Every detail was accounted for, every seat confirmed. So when Lila Grant, the lead flight attendant, appeared at Amara's side less than 5 minutes after the boarding call, a flicker of unease stirred quietly inside the girl's chest. Lila was a woman in her early 40s, tall and slender. Her ash blonde hair pulled back into a tight knot. Her navy uniform was immaculate, her presence commanding as she moved through the cabin like a sentinel. Amara had noticed her earlier, eyes sharp and appraising. But now that sharpness was focused on her, and it wasn't welcoming. "Excuse me, miss." Lila's voice was crisp, holding an edge that didn't invite discussion. "You're in the wrong seat." Amara blinked. She looked down at her boarding pass, then back up at Lila. "No, ma'am, this is seat 2B, she said softly but firmly. Lila's lips twitched into a dismissive smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. "You must be mistaken. This seat is not for children traveling alone." Amara's fingers tightened lightly around her phone resting on the tray table. A quiet fight stirred within her. The part that wanted to shrink away, to avoid confrontation, clashed with the part that remembered her mother's words like a shield. "Stand tall. Speak your truth, even if no one else will." She unfolded her boarding pass and held it out clearly. "Here is my ticket. Flight 427, Seat 2B. My mother booked this seat for me. I'm traveling alone. Yes, But I have authorization. Lila barely glanced at the paper, her gaze lingering instead on Amara's dark skin and youthful face as if sizing her up like an unwelcome guest in a place she didn't belong. I don't need to check, she said flatly. Unaccompanied minors aren't allowed in first class. That statement hung in the air like a heavy fog. The soft clinks of silverware and hushed conversation dimmed as a few nearby passengers turned their heads toward the growing tension. Amara swallowed the lump in her throat and sat straighter. Her heart raced, but she refused to look away. My mother called ahead and confirmed everything. I have all the paperwork. You can verify with your supervisor if you want. Lila's gaze hardened. I'm telling you, this is company policy. You need to move to economy immediately. Amara's mind spun, a whirlpool of confusion and hurt. This wasn't about policy. She could feel it in her bones. It was about something else. A silent judgment that said she did not belong here. Her hands rested gently on her knees. I don't understand why you won't check. I haven't done anything wrong. The lead attendant's eyes narrowed. Don't argue with me, child. Pack your things and come with me, or I'll have security escort you. A low murmur rose from the cabin. The stares of fellow passengers felt like invisible weights pressing down on Amara's shoulders. She wanted no trouble. She just wanted to fly peacefully, to sit in the seat she had earned. An older woman seated in 2D, a kind face framed by streaks of silver hair, leaned forward. Excuse me, miss. Why are you forcing this young lady to move? She hasn't disturbed anyone. Lila's gaze flicked coldly toward the woman. Please mind your own seat. She snapped before turning her attention back to Amara. Amara's breath hitched. The helplessness threatened to swallow her, but her mother's voice echoed in her mind. You never bow before injustice. She met Lila's eyes steadily. I'm sorry, but I'm not moving. This is my seat. For a moment, Lila's mask faltered, revealing a flicker of frustration beneath the professional facade. Then she straightened and pivoted toward the cockpit. The hushed tension deepened as the lead attendant left to summon the co-pilot. Amara's fingers trembled slightly as she glanced around. The faces that watched were a mix of curiosity, pity, and discomfort. She clenched her jaw. Outside the window, the last rays of the sun slipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in dusky pinks and purples. Inside, an invisible storm was brewing. A few minutes later, Lila returned with a man who wore the co-pilot's uniform, Derek Lawson. He was younger. His dark hair slicked back neatly, but his eyes were cold and unreadable as they fell on Amara. This isn't a debate, Derek said, his voice low but firm. You need to move to the seat we assigned you. Amara raised her chin slightly. My mother reserved this seat through VIP services. I'm authorized to sit here. Derek exchanged a quick glance with Lila. Have you verified her booking? He asked quietly. I know what I'm doing, Lila replied. Minors traveling alone don't belong in first class. Derek nodded toward Amara. Your mother understands the rules. You have two choices. Move now or security will escort you. Amara's gaze swept over the watching passengers. She saw Mrs. Ramirez's gentle eyes watching her closely. A soft shake of her head. Why don't you call your supervisor? Amara asked softly. Derek's eyebrow rose in surprise at her composure. He bristled but kept his stance. We don't take orders from a child. The air thickened with tension as Derek's words echoed. Amara's phone buzzed, gently in her hand. She read a message from her mother. I'm on my way. Hold your ground. She inhaled deeply, her resolve hardening like steel. Derek stepped closer. If you don't move, I will call security. Amara stood slowly, legs trembling, but posture proud. I'll go, not because I'm wrong, but because my mother taught me respect, even when it isn't returned. She grabbed her small backpack embroidered with her name and walked past the rows of seats. As she passed Mrs. Ramirez, the woman offered a small nod of encouragement. Amara sat near the emergency exit, dialing her mother. Nadia's calm voice on the other end gave her strength. "Mom, they made me move. You did the right thing. Amara, I'm coming." As Amara leaned back, the memory of a similar moment a year before flooded back, a moment when she and her mother had faced suspicion, even with a confirmed ticket. Her mother's voice then had been a quiet promise. "We never bow before injustice." And now, though the flight was still minutes from takeoff, Amara knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Amara sat quietly near the emergency exit, the new seat awkward and unfamiliar, but the weight in her chest was heavier than the discomfort of the narrow space. Her fingers lightly traced the embroidered letters on her backpack as she stared out the window at the fading light. The sky was deepening to indigo now, the stars beginning to peek through the dusk. She wanted to lose herself in the beauty of that endless sky, but her thoughts were tangled in a storm she did not want to face. Lila Grant had returned to her duties, but the sharpness in her eyes remained like a storm cloud hovering close above. Derek Lawson sat in the cockpit, glancing occasionally toward the cabin, his expression unreadable. The coldness of their rejection still lingered like a shadow that refused to lift. Amara's mind was a whirlwind. She thought about her mother's words repeated over and over during their long drives to school. The quiet dinners when the city lights blurred beyond the windows. Stand tall. Speak your truth even if no one else will. But was standing tall enough? She felt the ache of invisibility in the eyes that quickly glanced away. The murmurs hushed just enough to be heard, but not loud enough to change anything. The flight attendants had won this round. She had been forced to move, but the battle was far from over. Nearby, a few passengers exchanged quiet looks. Some shook their heads, others pretended not to notice. Amara wondered who was brave enough to speak and who was too afraid. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, a gentle cue signaling the final preparations for takeoff. The murmurs faded to a low hum punctuated by the soft click of seat belts fastening. Amara closed her eyes briefly, willing herself to breathe steady. The small vibration of her phone startled her. A new message from her mother. "I'm tracking the flight, hold on a little longer." She smiled softly to herself. Nadia was a woman who never backed down. If her daughter was forced to sit alone, Nadia would move mountains to fix it. The voice of a passenger pierced the quiet next to her. Sofia Ramirez, a woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile, leaned in with concern. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Amara met her gaze and nodded. "I'm fine, thank you." Sophia's eyes narrowed slightly as she glanced toward the front of the cabin. "I saw you had the right seat. I don't understand why they made you move." Amara shrugged, a bittersweet smile tugging at her lips. "It's not about the seat. It's about who they think I am." Sophia reached out to squeeze Amara's hand briefly. "You're braver than you know." As the plane began to taxi, Amara's thoughts wandered back to her first flight with her mother a year ago. They had boarded the same airline, same route, same hopeful hearts. But then the suspicion had come swiftly. The flight attendant had questioned Nadia multiple times, inspecting the boarding passes like she was searching for a mistake that wasn't there. Amara remembered the silent anger burning in her mother's eyes. The way she had refused to be intimidated, calmly stating the facts, yet still feeling the sting of being doubted simply because of the color of her skin. That day had been a lesson carved deep into Amara's heart. A lesson about courage, dignity, and the long road toward fairness. Now she was alone on the plane, but that lesson held her steady. Back in the cockpit, Derek Lawson was watching the cabin through the small window beside his seat. His jaw tightened as he overheard some of the passengers whispering about the incident. He shifted uneasily. This wasn't supposed to be part of his job. The rules were clear. The company had policies. Minors traveling alone did not sit in first class. But something about the way Amara had held herself, so composed and calm despite everything, unsettled him. He glanced down at his hands, remembering the uneasy conversation he had with Lila. She had been sure, confident even, in her authority. But had they really done the right thing? Across the cabin, Mrs. Sofia Ramirez caught his eye and gave a small nod of disapproval. Derek looked away quickly. Meanwhile, Mia Chen, the young ground staff member, was pacing in the rear galley. She had been at the gate when Amara boarded, personally verifying her ticket and authorization for first class. Mia's brow furrowed as she thought about the messages coming in from the flight attendant. Something wasn't right. She pulled out her phone and dialed the VIP desk number. "This is Mia Chen from Gate 18, she said clearly. "We have a situation on Flight 427. An unaccompanied minor was assigned a confirmed seat in first class, but was removed against protocol." Her voice was calm, but urgent. She relayed the details meticulously, explaining how Amara's ticket and all paperwork had been verified by her personally. The voice on the other end hesitated. "Are you certain this could be a serious breach if true?" "I am 100% certain. I checked her boarding pass and the VIP clearance myself," Mia replied. After a pause, the voice responded, "Thank you for reporting this immediately. Do not leave the aircraft. We are escalating the matter to senior leadership." Mia ended the call, heart pounding. She knew this could blow up beyond anything she had seen before. She glanced at the cabin where Lila Grant was standing near the front, her posture rigid. Mia felt a swell of determination. She would not let this injustice go unchallenged. The minutes crawled by, heavy with tension. Passengers shifted in their seats, whispering quietly. Some avoided eye contact, unsure whether to get involved. Others, like Sofia Ramirez, were visibly disturbed. Amara's phone buzzed again. "Mom is boarding now." A rush of relief flooded her. She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Her gaze swept the cabin, landing on faces filled with mixed emotions. Some looked away, some watched with curiosity, others with silent support. In her heart, Amara knew she was not alone anymore. Her mother was coming in with her, the strength to turn this moment around. The engines rumbled louder as the plane prepared to taxi toward the runway. Outside, the sky was a deep velvet blue dotted with stars. Inside, a quiet storm was gathering, one that no one could ignore. Amara moved slowly down the aisle, her small backpack clasped tightly in one hand. Each step echoed quietly in the hushed cabin, a steady rhythm that felt both endless and suffocating. The soft hum of the engines vibrated beneath her feet as passengers watched with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. The eyes that followed her path were heavy with unspoken questions, some filled with sympathy, others tinged with judgment. She glanced at the rows around her. Some passengers averted their gaze, unwilling to be drawn into the scene. Others whispered softly to the people beside them, their voices blending into a low murmur that filled the space between the cabin's polished panels and leather seats. Her heart pounded, but her expression remained composed. This was not how she imagined her flight would go. The first-class seat that was supposed to be hers felt like a distant promise, suddenly snatched away without explanation. The injustice weighed heavily on her young shoulders, but she refused to show the pain. Not here, not now. As she passed row 3, her eyes met those of Mrs. Sofia Ramirez, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. That simple gesture was a flicker of warmth in the cold air, a reminder that not everyone was blind to what was happening. It made Amara's chest tighten with gratitude and sorrow all at once. At last, she reached the seat near the emergency exit, a narrow spot with little leg room and no window to call her own. She sank into the seat quietly, smoothing the fabric of the armrest beneath her fingers. The contrast between this cramped corner and the spacious luxury she had been promised felt like a physical blow. She settled in as best she could, pulling out her phone and dialing her mother's number. The line rang twice before Nadia's calm voice answered. "Amara, honey, are you okay?" Nadia asked softly. "I'm fine, Mom," Amara replied, her voice steady, even though tears threatened to rise. "I tried to explain, but they still made me move." Nadia's sigh was gentle but filled with a quiet strength. "You did the right thing, baby. You stood your ground. I'm coming. Just hold on for a little longer." Amara smiled faintly, letting her mother's words wash over her like a balm. The promise of her arrival was a beacon in the dimness of the cabin. Across the aisle, the murmurs grew louder as some passengers began to discuss the incident. A few shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered about policies and fairness. It was clear that the calm, polite resistance of the young girl had unsettled many. In her seat, Amara's thoughts drifted to the past, to the day a year ago when she had flown with her mother for the first time. Back then, everything had seemed new and exciting. They had both worn their best clothes, their faces lit with hope. But even then, the shadow of suspicion had hovered. The flight attendant had questioned their tickets repeatedly, lingering over every detail as if searching for a mistake that did not exist. Amara remembered the quiet pride in her mother's eyes despite the indignity. Nadia had held her hand tightly, whispering words Amara would never forget. "Never let them make you feel less than you are. We cannot control how others see us, but we can control how we respond. Hold your head high always." Those words had settled deep in her heart. And now, separated from the safety of that first-class seat, she clung to them fiercely. The door to the cockpit opened, and Derek Lawson stepped back into the cabin. His expression was unreadable as he glanced at Amara and then toward the other passengers. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or doubt, but he quickly masked it with the cold professionalism expected of him. He approached Lila Grant near the front of the cabin. The two exchanged a few whispered words, their voices low but sharp enough to carry. Amara caught part of their conversation. "She's causing a scene," Lila said with a tight smile. "We're stuck between policy and perception." Derek replied quietly. Amara's mind raced. Was this really just about policy? Or was there something deeper, something unspoken that neither of them wanted to admit? Meanwhile, Mia Chen, the young ground staff member who had called the VIP desk earlier, stood near the rear galley watching the cabin unfold. She felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She had checked Amara's ticket personally. She knew the truth. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the VIP supervisor. "Keep monitoring. Senior leadership is on alert. Prepare for intervention if needed." Mia nodded to herself. She would not let this slide quietly. Back in the cabin, Sofia Ramirez leaned over to Amara again. "They don't always see us the way we want them to," she said gently. "But you showed them who you really are today." Amara smiled, the warmth spreading in her chest despite the cold around her. The plane began to taxi, the engines rising in pitch as they rolled toward the runway. The anticipation was palpable, but Amara's focus remained sharp. She knew her mother was coming. That thought gave her the courage to hold on. Suddenly, the cabin door opened with a soft thud. Heads turned instinctively. Nadia Brooks stepped through the aisle, her posture regal, her gaze steady. The energy in the cabin shifted instantly. Where moments before there had been tension and doubt, now there was quiet respect. Nadia's eyes locked on Amara, and a small smile of reassurance passed between them. Amara took a deep breath and straightened in her seat. She was ready for whatever came next. The eyes of every passenger followed Nadia as she walked with calm determination toward the front of the cabin. The moment was heavy with expectation. Amara's heart pounded in time with the rising tension. This flight was no longer just a journey from one city to another. It was the stage for a confrontation long overdue. A reckoning not just for one girl, but for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. Outside the gate at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, Nadia's heels clicked with purpose on the polished floor as she made her way through the terminal. Her dark coat billowed slightly behind her, but her calm demeanor was unshakable. The late afternoon light filtered through the large windows, casting long shadows across the bustling concourse. She had spent the last hour navigating back-to-back meetings and endless calls. But now all her focus was on Flight 427 and more importantly her daughter. Nadia's mind replayed the text messages she had received moments ago. The updates from Mia Chen, the ground staff who had flagged the issue, had stirred a quiet storm inside her. Amara, her strong and composed 12-year-old, had been forced out of her rightful first-class seat despite confirmed bookings and explicit VIP clearance. It was a humiliation that Nadia could neither accept nor ignore. As she approached the gate, Nadia glanced around, noting the casual conversations and oblivious faces of travelers waiting for their flights. To most, this was just another evening journey. But for her, it was the prelude to a confrontation that would demand accountability and justice. At the jet bridge, Mia Chen spotted her and immediately approached. Her face a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Ms. Brooks, thank God you're here," Mia said softly. "I've checked everything myself. Amara's ticket is absolutely in order, but the lead flight attendant and the co-pilot have insisted on moving her to economy." Nadia nodded, her jaw tightening. "Thank you, Mia. I'm here to fix this together." They stepped onto the aircraft, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. The hum of the engines mingled with the subdued whispers of passengers who had sensed the tension earlier, but hadn't yet grasped the full extent of the situation. Nadia's sharp gaze swept over the first-class cabin. There, standing near the entrance, were Lila Grant and Derek Lawson. Their posture stiffened as they caught sight of her. Lila's eyes narrowed, her usual confident mask slipping for a fleeting moment before she composed herself. Derek's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. Nadia took measured steps forward, her presence commanding but calm. The murmur of passengers died down as they realized who had entered the cabin. A hush settled as if the plane itself was holding its breath. Stopping near the first row, Nadia fixed her gaze on Lila and then on Derek. "Can someone explain to me why my daughter was removed from her confirmed seat?" Nadia's voice was soft but carried an undeniable authority. Lila opened her mouth but hesitated. "Ms. Brooks, this is a misunderstanding. We were following airline safety regulations and company policy." Nadia lifted an eyebrow, her tone cutting but polite. "I am well aware of airline policies. It is curious, however, that these regulations were not checked before asking Amara to move. She reached into her handbag and produced a copy of the VIP confirmation she had received weeks earlier. This was confirmed by your VIP desk. Are you telling me that your own company ignored this? Lila's lips pressed into a thin line. Unaccompanied minors are not permitted in first class. It's a safety measure. Nadia's eyes glinted with quiet fire. Then why was my daughter allowed to board and sit there in the first place? Why was her boarding pass accepted without question? Derek stepped forward, attempting to diffuse the tension. Ms. Brooks, our staff made a judgment call based on the situation on board. Nadia turned to him sharply. A judgment call based on what? Her age or the color of her skin? The cabin fell into a deep silence. Passengers shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, others exchanging glances. The words had hung in the air like a challenge and a reckoning all at once. Derek's jaw clenched. He looked down, unwilling or unable to meet Nadia's unwavering gaze. Nadia continued, addressing the entire cabin with a voice that blended strength and grace. This is not just about my daughter. This is about the dignity of every passenger who has ever been judged unfairly. It is about accountability. Lila swallowed hard, the weight of the accusation pressing on her. Her usual composure faltered, and for the first time, her voice wavered. We only wanted to ensure safety. Nadia shook her head. Safety is a noble cause, but it cannot be a cover for prejudice. She stepped closer, her tone firm. If you had concerns, why did you not verify with your superiors? Why did you refuse to check the boarding pass initially? Lila's eyes flickered with shame, but she said nothing. Nadia turned toward the passengers, her eyes scanning the room. Many of you witnessed this. Some of you were silent, but silence enables injustice. The murmurs grew louder, but there was no chaos. Instead, a quiet recognition that something significant was unfolding. From the back of the cabin, a soft cough drew attention. Clarence Washington, an elderly black man, slowly rose from his seat. His hands trembled slightly as he steadied himself. I stayed quiet when it happened, he admitted. I thought maybe it wasn't my place, but watching this, I realized silence is its own kind of harm. He met Nadia's eyes and nodded respectfully. Nadia's gaze softened. Thank you, Mr. Washington. It takes courage to admit that. Amara watched from her seat near the emergency exit. Her chest swelled with pride and relief. Her mother's presence was a shield, a force that no prejudice could push back. Nadia knelt beside her daughter and took her hand gently. You did exactly what I taught you. You stood strong. Amara looked up and smiled, her dark eyes shining with quiet confidence. Nadia then addressed Lila and Derek directly. I expect a full explanation for this treatment and a public apology to my daughter. Lila shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Derek's shoulders sagged as the weight of the moment settled on him. The entire cabin waited for a response, the air thick with anticipation. Nadia continued, this flight will not depart until this matter is resolved. I have already contacted Harmony Airways leadership. They will be here shortly. Passengers exchanged looks. A few nodded in approval. Others whispered words of support for the young girl who had been wronged. Nadia stood and straightened. Her voice softened as she spoke to Amara. Hold on a little longer, baby. We're going to make this right. Outside the window, the sky darkened further. The airport lights glowed like stars on the ground. Inside the cabin, a quiet battle had begun, one that would test the company's values and the courage of every person aboard. Nadia Brooks was not a woman to back down, and neither was her daughter. The cabin was tense, but hushed as the plane sat still on the tarmac, engines idling softly. The passengers had settled back into their seats, but an invisible thread of anticipation stretched taut between every face. Conversations whispered under breath, eyes darted furtively, and the weight of the moment pressed upon everyone like the thick humidity of a summer storm. Amara sat near the emergency exit, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Her breathing was steady, but inside a tempest churned. The sight of her mother standing strong near the front of the plane had ignited a fierce hope deep in her chest, but she also knew the battles like this were rarely won with a single word or act. Lila Grant remained near the entrance of the first-class cabin, her posture rigid, jaw clenched. She cast sharp, calculating glances at both Nadia and Amara, as if trying to figure out how to reclaim control of a situation quickly slipping beyond her grasp. Derek Lawson stood beside her, arms folded, his usual cold professionalism cracked by a faint hint of doubt. The flickering uncertainty in his eyes betrayed the struggle within whether to stand by protocol or acknowledge the discomfort growing around him. In the midst of this, Mia Chen moved quietly toward Amara's seat. The young ground staff member's face was set with determination. She had done her part to alert leadership and now felt a personal responsibility to see this through. "Amara," Mia said softly, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "I've spoken with the VIP desk again. They're sending people from management to handle this. Stay strong." Amara nodded, grateful for the support. Her phone buzzed once more. A message from Nadia. "Almost there. Hold on." Across the cabin, Mrs. Sofia Ramirez shifted in her seat, watching the interactions with growing concern. She glanced around and saw other passengers who looked uncomfortable, some even ashamed. The divide was palpable. Some wanted to act but hesitated while others kept their silence as a shield. The man seated next to Sophia, Clarence Washington, broke the quiet. "This isn't just about a seat," he said quietly, but clearly enough for those nearby to hear. "It's about how we see each other, how we treat each other. And sometimes that's the hardest lesson to learn." His words rippled through the cabin like a slow wave. Heads nodded subtly. A few passengers glanced away, wrestling with their own reflections. Back at the front, Lila finally broke her silence. "We are enforcing policies that ensure safety and comfort for all passengers," she said, her voice firm, though tinged with frustration. "Minors traveling alone in first class create complications." Nadia met her gaze without flinching. "Policies should protect, not exclude based on fear or bias. If comfort comes at the cost of justice, then the policy needs reconsideration." Derek cleared his throat. "Perhaps this is a misunderstanding that we need to clarify with management," he suggested. Nadia nodded sharply. "Exactly. And I will be speaking with them shortly." The intercom crackled to life and a voice from Harmony Airways management announced that representatives were en route to address the situation. A ripple of relief passed through the cabin. Amara's heart thumped in her chest. She felt the walls close in and then widen all at once. The pressure of scrutiny balanced by the support now gathering around her. In the quiet moments that followed, Amara allowed herself to think about how her mother had taught her to stand firm, but remain kind, to fight injustice, not with anger, but with dignity. She glanced around at the faces of the other passengers, many of whom were watching silently, waiting to see how this would unfold. Some, she sensed, were inspired by her courage. Others wrestled with their own discomfort, unsure if they could find the strength to speak out if they were in her place. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Nadia. "Hold steady. Justice is coming." Amara squeezed her mother's words tightly in her heart. Lila and Derek huddled together near the front. Their voices dropped to whispers, sharp and urgent. It was clear they were feeling the weight of the moment, the eyes of the passengers, and the looming presence of management. A group of passengers began to quietly converse, voicing support for Amara and criticism of the airline's handling of the situation. The hushed conversations built a growing sense of solidarity. Sofia Ramirez leaned toward the elderly man beside her. "It's time people stop pretending this kind of thing isn't happening," she said quietly. Clarence nodded. "It's up to all of us to break the silence." At that moment, Amara felt a soft touch on her shoulder. She turned to see Mia Chen offering a reassuring smile. "We're almost there," Mia said softly. "You're not alone." Amara's lips curved into a small smile. The storm inside her began to calm, replaced by a quiet fire of resolve. The plane's engine surged gently as the captain announced that management representatives would be boarding shortly. The tension remained thick, but beneath it was a current of hope. Amara took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music from her headphones mingle with the sounds of the cabin. She thought about her mother's voice, steady and unwavering, and the lessons of courage she had learned. She was ready, because sometimes standing still with dignity was the loudest roar of all. The plane's door slid open with a soft whoosh, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Nadia Brooks stepped onto the aircraft, her presence commanding attention without a word. The quiet murmur of conversations faded to a near hush as passengers turned their heads, their eyes drawn to the woman whose reputation preceded her, dressed simply yet impeccably. Nadia carried herself with the poise of someone accustomed to boardrooms and negotiations, but also with a warmth that softened the sharp edges of her authority. Her gaze swept over the cabin, taking in the rows of curious faces before settling on her daughter seated near the emergency exit. Amara sat upright, her eyes meeting Nadia's with a mixture of relief and quiet strength. Nadia approached steadily, flanked by Mia Chen and a couple of airline officials who had arrived moments before. The presence of Harmony Airways management signaled that this was no ordinary dispute. It was a matter that had escalated to the highest levels. Lila Grant and Derek Lawson stood near the front, their earlier confidence replaced by visible tension. Lila's lips pressed into a thin line while Derek shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking between Nadia and the other passengers. Nadia's voice broke the silence, calm but resolute. "I am here to understand why my daughter was removed from her assigned seat." Lila cleared her throat. "Ms. Brooks, this was a misunderstanding. Our staff were following safety protocols regarding unaccompanied minors." Nadia's eyes narrowed slightly. "If that is true, why was she allowed to board and sit there in the first place? Why was no verification done before asking her to move?" The cabin remained silent, every eye locked on the unfolding exchange. Derek stepped forward. "Our intention was never to cause harm or discomfort. We were applying policies as we understood them." Nadia's tone sharpened. "Policies should protect passengers, not discriminate against them. I have confirmation from your VIP services that my daughter's booking is valid. I expect your staff to adhere to that, not to make assumptions based on appearances." The room was thick with tension. Some passengers shifted uneasily, others nodded subtly in agreement. The moment felt like a reckoning, not just for the airline, but for every person who had ever faced prejudice disguised as policy. From the back of the cabin, Sofia Ramirez's voice rose softly but firmly. "I saw her ticket clearly. She belongs in first class." Lila shot a cold glance toward Sofia, but said nothing. Nadia continued, addressing the entire cabin. "This is not just about a seat on a plane. This is about fairness and respect. It is about how we treat one another, especially when the stakes are small, but the wounds run deep. She turned back to Lila and Derek. I am requesting a full explanation and a public apology to my daughter for the unjust treatment she has endured. Lila's composure wavered. Ms. Brooks, we apologize if there was any misunderstanding. Nadia shook her head. An apology without accountability is meaningless. I want to know how such a mistake was allowed to happen and how you will ensure it never happens again. Derek swallowed hard, the weight of Nadia's words pressing heavily on him. A soft cough drew attention to Clarence Washington, the elderly passenger who had spoken earlier. He stood slowly, his voice steady despite his age. It's time we all take responsibility. Silence and inaction only allow injustice to continue. Nadia smiled gently at Clarence. Thank you. It takes courage to admit our shortcomings and even more to change. Amara sat quietly, her heart swelling with pride and hope. Her mother was the shield she needed and the voice that could not be ignored. Nadia knelt beside her daughter, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. You showed strength today that many adults lack. I am proud of you. Amara smiled, the fierce light in her eyes shining brighter. Nadia turned once more to the cabin. I want everyone here to know that this is not the end of the story. I have already spoken with Harmony Airways leadership and they are committed to reviewing policies and training to prevent discrimination. A ripple of murmurs and subtle applause spread through the cabin. Passengers exchanged looks that spoke of renewed hope and a shared commitment to change. As the announcement came over the intercom that new crew members would be arriving shortly, Nadia stood, her voice carrying finality. This flight will not depart until there is accountability and respect for all passengers. The plane remained still, engines humming softly as the weight of the moment settled over everyone. Outside the window, the city lights of Seattle twinkled like distant stars. Inside, a new chapter was beginning, one of courage, dignity, and the promise of justice. The cabin felt frozen in time as Nadia's words hung heavily in the air. Passengers remained seated, their eyes fixed on the unfolding scene near the first-class entrance. The tension was palpable, a thick silence stretched taut between hope and uncertainty. Lila Grant stood rigid, her usual confident demeanor cracked by the intensity of the moment. Her eyes flickered nervously as she glanced at Derek Lawson, who remained stoic, but clearly unsettled. The weight of Nadia's presence and words had shifted the power dynamic in the cabin dramatically. Across the aisle, Sofia Ramirez shifted forward in her seat, determination etched into her features. She caught the gaze of other passengers, some of whom began to lean in, emboldened by her quiet defiance. Clarence Washington, the elderly man who had already spoken out, cleared his throat again and slowly rose from his seat. Despite the tremor in his hands, his voice was steady and carried through the cabin. I have witnessed many moments where silence was the easy choice, he said, his eyes scanning the passengers around him. But silence has its cost. It allows wrongs to continue unchecked. His words resonated deeply with those nearby. A murmur of agreement spread quietly through the rows. Nadia nodded approvingly. Exactly. Speaking up is the first step toward change. She turned to Lila and Derek, her voice unwavering. Your actions today will be remembered by everyone here. How you respond now will define your integrity. Lila's shoulders tensed, and for a brief moment, her facade slipped. I was only trying to do my job, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I didn't intend to hurt anyone. Nadia stepped closer, her tone soft but firm. Intentions matter less than impact. What you allowed to happen to my daughter was unjust and rooted in bias. Derek finally broke his silence. I followed orders and policies. Nadia's eyes locked onto his. Policies can be flawed, and when they are applied without empathy or care, they become instruments of harm. A pregnant pause filled the cabin as the passengers absorbed the exchange. Many faces showed signs of internal conflict, discomfort, shame, reflection. Amara watched intently, her hands clasped tightly together. The courage radiating from her mother gave her strength she didn't know she had. Nadia knelt beside her daughter, brushing a loose curl behind Amara's ear. Remember, Amara, standing up with grace is a powerful thing. You have already changed the hearts of many. Amara smiled softly, feeling a quiet pride swell within. Suddenly, the cabin intercom crackled to life. The voice of a senior Harmony Airways executive resonating clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Victor Lang, Director of Passenger Experience. We are aware of the situation on board and are currently reviewing all policies and procedures. Harmony Airways is committed to fairness, respect, and accountability. A ripple of applause swept through the cabin, growing steadily as passengers expressed their support. Lauren Bennett, another executive, entered the cabin alongside Victor Lang, their expressions serious but resolute. Nadia greeted them with a nod, her posture regal. We expect a full investigation and corrective measures, Nadia said firmly. Victor Lang responded, You have my personal assurance, Ms. Brooks, that this will be addressed thoroughly. Lila and Derek exchanged uneasy glances, the gravity of the moment sinking in fully. The crowd's energy shifted from frustration to hope, a collective breath held in anticipation of justice. As the executives conferred quietly, Sophia leaned toward Clarence. It takes courage to stand up. Today we witnessed that courage in this cabin. Clarence nodded, his eyes shining, and it's contagious. Amara looked around at the faces now filled with newfound resolve. The journey that had started with humiliation was transforming into something larger, a movement toward fairness and dignity. Nadia took her daughter's hand gently. This is only the beginning, Amara. Together, we will make sure this doesn't happen again. Amara squeezed her mother's hand, her heart steady despite the uncertainty ahead. The plane remained grounded, but the passengers aboard had embarked on a new voyage, one toward justice, respect, and shared humanity. The cabin remained filled with a thick silence. But beneath it, a new current of anticipation flowed. Passengers exchanged glances that spoke volumes, questions, hopes, and a shared yearning for resolution. The atmosphere was charged with expectation as Nadia Brooks stood firmly, her gaze unwavering, signaling that this moment was far from over. Moments later, the plane's front door opened again, and two new figures stepped into the cabin. Victor Lang and Lauren Bennett, senior executives of Harmony Airways, moved with purposeful grace. Their presence brought a sense of gravity and official weight that neither Lila Grant nor Derek Lawson could ignore. Nadia approached them without hesitation. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice calm but resolute. We need to ensure this matter is addressed immediately. Victor nodded, his expression serious. Ms. Brooks, we've reviewed the situation and agree that a thorough investigation is warranted. For now, it is necessary to make immediate changes to ensure all passengers feel safe and respected. Lauren added, Lila Grant and Derek Lawson will be relieved of their duties on this flight pending the outcome of our inquiry. A collective breath seemed to release across the cabin. Lila's face paled, her lips parting in silent shock. Derek's posture stiffened as the reality of the decision settled upon him. Both stood motionless, the weight of their actions pressing down. Nadia's voice softened as she turned to her daughter, who sat quietly watching the unfolding scene. Amara, It's time to go back to your seat. This is your rightful place. Amara rose slowly, steady despite the tightness in her chest. She walked with measured steps toward the first-class section, her eyes briefly meeting those of the passengers. Many smiled warmly or nodded in silent support. The earlier whispers had transformed into an undercurrent of encouragement. As she reached seat 2B, Nadia stepped forward and gently helped her daughter settle in. The gesture was tender yet carried the weight of victory and resilience. Nadia fastened Amara's seat belt, her eyes shining with pride. The cabin broke into soft applause, an outpouring of respect and solidarity that rippled from the back of the plane to the front. It was not loud or theatrical, but genuine and heartfelt, a collective statement against injustice. Across the aisle, Sofia Ramirez smiled, her eyes moist with emotion. Clarence Washington gave a slow nod of approval, his face marked with quiet satisfaction. Even some passengers who had been silent moments before now exchanged glances filled with renewed hope. The new crew members, fresh-faced and professional, stepped into the cabin, their demeanor respectful and attentive. They offered polite nods to Nadia and Amara, signaling a fresh start for the flight and its passengers. Nadia rose and addressed the cabin once more, her voice clear and authoritative. What we witnessed today is a reminder that justice requires vigilance, courage, and compassion. I thank all of you for your understanding and support. Together we can create a world where dignity is not a privilege but a right. Her words resonated deeply. Passengers sat in thoughtful silence, absorbing the profound truth of her message. The applause faded slowly, replaced by a reflective hush. Amara leaned back in her seat, the familiar luxury and comfort surrounding her now feeling more meaningful than ever. She looked out the window as the city lights blurred past. Her heart lighter but forever changed. Nadia's hand rested gently on her daughter's shoulder. A silent promise of unwavering support and love. Outside, the plane's engines hummed to life, signaling that the journey was about to continue. But inside, something far more important had taken flight, a movement toward respect, fairness, and enduring change. The passengers were no longer just travelers on a plane. They had become witnesses to a moment that would ripple beyond the cabin walls, shaping conversations and actions long after the flight had landed. For Amara, this was the beginning of a lifelong journey. A journey defined not by the miles traveled, but by the courage to stand firm, speak truth, and demand justice. Amara stood at the aisle, her heart pounding in rhythm with the slow clapping that spread through the cabin. The sound was soft at first, tentative and unsure, but quickly grew louder as more passengers joined in. It was a gentle chorus of support, of acknowledgement, of solidarity. The noise wasn't about celebration alone. It was about standing up for what was right and making sure the message was heard. The new crew members, calm and composed, moved through the cabin with a renewed sense of purpose. Their faces reflected respect and professionalism. Unlike the cold indifference that had marked the earlier encounters, there was warmth in their eyes, a willingness to make this flight a safe and dignified space for everyone. Amara walked slowly down the aisle, each step a statement of resilience. The soft carpet beneath her feet was a stark contrast to the heavy weight she had felt just minutes before when forced to leave her seat. Now returning to 2B felt like reclaiming her place, not just on the plane, but in the world. Her eyes met those of Sofia Ramirez once more. The woman smiled gently and reached into her purse, pulling out a small folded note. She extended it to Amara with a kind voice. "Here, keep this with you." Amara accepted the note, her fingers trembling slightly. She unfolded it carefully. The simple words written in neat script touched her deeply. Thank you for reminding us what strength looks like. The warmth from that small piece of paper radiated through her. It was more than words. It was a gift of courage from someone who had witnessed her quiet battle. As Amara reached her seat, she felt a wave of emotions: relief, pride, exhaustion, but above all, hope. Nadia was there, waiting beside her, a gentle smile playing on her lips. With a tender hand, she helped secure Amara's seat belt and brushed a stray curl from her daughter's forehead. "You did it, Amara," Nadia whispered. "You showed the world who you are." Amara's dark eyes shimmered with gratitude and determination. "It's not just me," she replied softly. "It's all of us who refuse to stay silent." The passengers around them began to settle into a new rhythm, the earlier tension slowly dissolving into a sense of peace and unity. Even those who had been silent before seemed to share in the quiet strength that filled the cabin. Near the back, Clarence Washington gave a small nod of approval, his eyes reflecting a deeper understanding. He slowly returned to his seat, his steps lighter than before. Mia Chen watched from the rear galley, a soft smile on her face. The young ground staff member knew the fight was far from over, but seeing Amara return to her seat with dignity was a victory in itself. As the plane began its final preparations for takeoff, the captain's voice came over the intercom with a calm assurance. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience and understanding. We will be departing shortly. We wish you a safe and pleasant flight." The cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the engine's steady roar filled the space. Outside, the city lights twinkled like a sea of stars, welcoming the plane as it readied for its journey. Amara glanced out the window, watching the familiar skyline fade into the distance. Her heart was full, buoyed by the knowledge that standing firm in the face of injustice could ripple far beyond this moment. Nadia leaned close and whispered, "Today was a turning point, not just for you, but for everyone here." Amara nodded, her gaze steady. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." The plane taxied onto the runway, and as it lifted off into the night sky, Amara felt a quiet promise settling within her. A promise to never be silenced, to always hold her ground and to inspire others to do the same. The journey ahead was long. But she was no longer alone. Together with her mother and the passengers who stood by her, Amara had begun to write a new story. A story of courage, justice, and unyielding hope. The soft hum of the plane's engines filled the cabin as it soared through the night sky. The passengers settled into a new rhythm, a quiet calm having replaced the tension that had gripped them only moments before. The earlier confrontation, which had seemed so charged and divisive, now felt like a turning point, a collective awakening that no one aboard would soon forget. Amara sat quietly in her first-class seat, her gaze drifting to the window where the stars stretched endlessly. The cool night air brushing against the glass seemed to mirror the peace that had finally begun to settle inside her. She could feel the weight of the journey she had just endured, but it no longer pressed down with fear or uncertainty. Instead, it was a burden transformed into strength. Beside her, Nadia Brooks watched the cabin with a thoughtful expression. Her eyes met those of several passengers who now looked back at her and Amara with respect and empathy. The subtle shift in their demeanor was unmistakable. Where once there had been doubt or avoidance, there was now a shared recognition of courage and justice. Clarence Washington, the elderly man who had spoken out so bravely, slowly rose from his seat and made his way toward Amara. His steps were deliberate but unsteady, each movement carrying the weight of years lived and lessons learned. When he reached her, he bent slightly to meet her gaze. "Amara," he said, his voice warm yet tinged with emotion. "I want to apologize for not speaking up sooner. I was afraid, and I thought silence was safer. But you showed me that silence is the greatest danger of all. Amara smiled softly, her young face radiating forgiveness and understanding. It's okay, Mr. Washington. What matters is that you spoke now. That's what courage looks like. The two shared a quiet moment of connection, bridging generations through empathy and shared resolve. Meanwhile, Sofia Ramirez watched from her seat, her eyes bright with admiration. She reached into her purse and pulled out the note she had given Amara earlier. The simple words, "Thank you for reminding us what strength looks like," seemed to echo through the cabin like a quiet anthem. Nadia leaned toward her daughter and whispered, "You have changed more than just your seat today, Amara. You have changed hearts." Amara nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of humility and pride. "I just stood still," she replied softly. "But sometimes standing still is the loudest thing you can do." The passengers around them seemed to absorb the words, their expressions reflecting a mix of introspection and hope. The cabin had become more than just a space for travel. It had become a place of transformation. Mia Chen moved through the rows with quiet efficiency, checking on passengers and ensuring their comfort. She paused briefly by Nadia and Amara, offering a reassuring smile. "Thank you for your courage," Mia said quietly. "You have reminded us all why fairness matters." Nadia reached out and took Mia's hand, a gesture of solidarity and gratitude. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience and understanding. We will be landing shortly. We hope you have had a safe and pleasant flight." As the plane began its descent, the city lights below twinkled like 1,000 tiny promises. Amara watched them with a heart full of hope for the future. A future where every passenger, no matter their age, race, or background, would be treated with dignity and respect. As the wheels touched down and the plane taxied to the gate, Nadia and Amara prepared to disembark. Passengers around them offered nods and smiles, silent affirmations of the journey they had shared. Outside the terminal, reporters and cameras awaited, eager to capture the story that had unfolded on Flight 427. But Nadia stepped forward with quiet dignity, requesting privacy for her daughter. The story, she knew, was far from over. It was just beginning. Amara looked up at her mother, her voice soft but certain. "Mom, what happens now?" Nadia smiled gently. "Now we make sure this never happens to anyone else." The bond between mother and daughter was unbreakable, a testament to resilience, love, and the power of standing up for what is right. As they walked into the terminal together, hand in hand, Amara knew that she had not only reclaimed her seat on that plane, but had taken a seat at the table of change. And that was the greatest journey of all. The days following the flight were a whirlwind of attention and emotion for Amara and Nadia Brooks. The story of the young girl who had been wrongfully removed from her first-class seat quickly spread beyond the confines of the aircraft, capturing the hearts and minds of people across the country. News outlets picked up the narrative. Social media buzzed with support and outrage, and conversations about fairness, bias, and justice ignited in living rooms, offices, and schools. For Nadia, the flood of public attention was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it offered a platform to demand systemic change in the airline industry and beyond. On the other, it brought the intimate details of their struggle into the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny. Yet she faced it all with the same quiet strength that had carried her through the ordeal on the plane. Amara, meanwhile, was navigating a new reality, one where her courage inspired thousands, but also made her the target of unwanted attention. She missed the calm anonymity of her everyday life, but understood the importance of standing tall in the face of challenges. At their home, the Brooks family gathered in the living room. The soft glow of the evening lamps casting warm light across the walls lined with family photos and awards. Nadia sat beside Amara on the couch, their hands intertwined. "We've started a conversation that can't be ignored now," Nadia said softly. "This isn't just about one flight or one girl. It's about every person who has felt unseen or unheard." Amara nodded, her eyes reflecting a newfound maturity. "I want to keep fighting, Mom. Not just for me, but for everyone who faces this." Nadia smiled proudly. "That's the spirit of a true leader." The airline Harmony Airways responded swiftly to the public outcry. Leadership announced an immediate review of policies related to unaccompanied minors and diversity training for all staff. They pledged to implement new protocols designed to prevent discrimination and ensure that every passenger is treated with dignity. Lila Grant and Derek Lawson faced serious consequences for their actions. Both were placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The airline released a public apology acknowledging the mistakes made and the harm caused to Amara and her family. Behind closed doors, Lila grappled with the weight of her decisions. The realization that her biases had caused pain and injustice forced her into deep reflection. It was a painful but necessary journey toward understanding and growth. Derek too found himself confronting uncomfortable truths. He had followed orders without question, but now he understood the cost of blind compliance. The experience challenged him to reconsider not only his role as a flight officer, but his responsibilities as a human being. Meanwhile, passengers from Flight 427 reached out to Nadia and Amara, sharing their stories of witnessing the event and the courage it took to stand up. Some confessed their own struggles with silence and inaction, while others expressed gratitude for the example set by the young girl. One such message came from Sofia Ramirez, who wrote, "Your strength inspired me to speak up in my community. Change begins with voices like yours." Clarence Washington too kept in touch, offering wisdom and encouragement. "You reminded me that it's never too late to make a difference." The Brooks family understood that this was only the beginning of a larger movement. Nadia began working with advocacy groups and policymakers to push for industry-wide reforms. While Amara spoke at schools and community centers, sharing her story and encouraging others to stand against injustice. Their journey was a testament to resilience, hope, and the power of standing firm in one's truth. One quiet evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Nadia looked at her daughter and said, "You changed a flight, a company, and maybe even a generation." Amara smiled softly, her eyes bright. "I just stood in my seat, and sometimes that is all it takes." The sun rose over the city skyline, casting golden light through the Brooks family's home. The events of the past weeks had settled into a new rhythm, one marked by both reflection and hope. The story of Flight 427 and the courage of Amara Brooks had become more than headlines. It had become a symbol of resilience and change. Amara stood by the window, gazing out at the world beyond. Her heart was lighter now, filled with a quiet confidence that came from knowing she had stood her ground. The seat in first class was more than just a place on a plane. It was a seat in the narrative of justice. Nadia entered the room, her presence steady and calming. She placed a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder and smiled warmly. "How are you feeling today?" Amara turned, meeting her mother's eyes. "Stronger, ready for whatever comes next." Nadia nodded. "Good, because the journey isn't over. It's only just beginning together." They had sparked a movement and awakening within an industry and a community that had long ignored the quiet battles faced by so many. The Amara Protocol, a new comprehensive training program named after Amara's courage, was being adopted by airlines across the country. It focused on education, awareness, and empowerment to combat discrimination and bias. The Brooks family story had inspired countless others to find their voices, to challenge injustice wherever it appeared. Amara's experience reminded everyone that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, "I will try again tomorrow." The world was shifting and Amara was at the heart of that change. One afternoon, Nadia and Amara attended a community event focused on youth empowerment. The room buzzed with energy and hope as young people shared stories of resilience and dreams for a better future. Amara took the stage, her voice clear and steady as she spoke. "I never thought my seat on a plane could change anything, but it did. It showed me that standing up for what is right can inspire others. We all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small we feel." The audience erupted in applause, their faces glowing with inspiration. Backstage, Nadia hugged her daughter tightly. "I'm proud of you, Amara. You are a beacon of hope." Amara smiled, her eyes bright with promise. "Thank you, Mom, for teaching me to stand tall." The journey that began with a single seat had become a path toward justice, dignity, and respect for all. Amara knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready. With her mother's guidance and the support of a community awakened to the power of change, she was prepared to face whatever came next. As they left the event hand in hand, Amara looked up at the sky. The horizon stretched wide and endless, filled with possibilities. Her journey was far from over. It was just beginning. Amara Brooks's story is a powerful reminder that discrimination can surface anywhere, even thousands of feet above the ground, where every passenger should feel safe and respected. What happened to her was not just unfair. It was an urgent call to recognize and reject the quiet prejudices that still permeate our world. Her calm strength and her mother's unwavering support showed us the true meaning of dignity in the face of injustice. As we reflect on this journey, let us honor those who dare to speak up and stand firm when it matters most. Let us condemn the attitudes and actions that seek to divide and diminish others based on skin color, age, or any difference. Change begins when we break the silence, challenge bias, and lift each other up with empathy and respect. Thank you for joining us in witnessing this story of resilience and hope. If this video moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can amplify voices that demand justice and keep telling stories that inspire change. Stay with us for more powerful stories ahead. Because every voice matters and every story can spark a revolution.